Hi there. I'm back with another review for you. I really want to talk about Nightb by Rachel Yoder because this book definitely made me feel some things while I was reading it. And I just really have been wanting to talk about it. And the problem is I haven't been able to figure out how I want to talk about it. Because there's a lot we could talk about in this book. There's a lot of different elements of it that I could probably talk about for an hour each and essentially probably tell you nothing in that hour except for the fact that you would get the idea that I really like this book. The weird thing is I did really like this book, but it's still probably like a 4. I don't think it's like an amazing thing that everyone is going to like. It's not going to be on the top of my list for the year, but it was good and I enjoyed it for what it was, and it made me feel some things, so I want to talk about them. I think I'm gonna pick just kind of one quote that I really want to talk about, and I'll give you a synopsis of the book before I do that, and then I'll kind of talk a little bit about some elements that I liked. But I have a ton of quotes that I highlighted from this and saved to Goodreads, so I did get this from the library, a digital version, so I read it with my Kindle, and then everything you highlight gets uploaded to Goodreads if you save it, which is great, so that I don't have to keep the book, and then if I ever get the book again, it'll allow me to go to those. So I'm able to, I have this like list of things that I highlighted, and one of them I was really pissed off. I'm just gonna tell you now. I was really pissed off because Goodreads cut off the highlight because they said that I had highlighted too many things, but other people, or too long of things, but other people have highlighted this whole thing, and I found the rest of the quote by searching it, and it was other people's Goodreads highlights that came up. So Goodreads just got mad at me for highlighting this whole quote because it is kind of long. But anyway, so this is me being frustrated with Goodreads. All right, so Nightb is advertised by Penguin Random House on their website as a women's literature book. I am going to argue a little bit that I think this could fit in a literary horror. It's not scary per se, but there are elements of horror in here, and I think it really should be slotted in there. I understand why it's labeled as women's literature because I don't think a lot of men would want to read this or get a lot out of it if they did read it, and it is definitely targeted at women and a specific like demographic of women, and I think I'll kind of be able to explain that a little bit as we go. I did write out like a whole like video essay style thing, but then I got uncomfortable with the idea of doing that, and we're just gonna chat instead. So maybe I'll do that in the future. But yeah, so we're gonna chat. So this is gonna be a little messy because I do kind of have an idea of what I want to say, but I have not written this out in a script. So, Nightb. This book kind of talks about the idea of transformation and becoming, and it does it in a very, like, literal sense of the word. Nightb transforms because of her rage. And in the book, she's either referred to as the mother or Nightb. No other name is given to her. So, picking up from there, we're following this woman who is introduced to us as the mother. And we start off by learning that she has kind of become obsessed with this little patch of hair that she's developed like on the back of her neck, and she kind of describes it as like silky and smooth, and she just kind of can't stop touching it. And then she thinks her canines are getting a little bit sharper, and she feels a little weird, and so she mentions to her husband, and who is just referred to as the husband throughout the rest of the book, and he or her husband or the husband, and he kind of brushes her off, and he's like, oh, you're being ridiculous, and makes a big joke out of it. So she makes a joke out of it too, because she's like, oh, he's a very like literal person. He's very studious. He you know, he's not pushing me in the wrong direction. But she is a little frustrated that he brushes it off. And so she has a 2-year-old son that she stays home with. She didn't used to stay home. She was an artist, and she got promoted to be like the director of this gallery. It was essentially what she describes as her dream job. She has like 2 master's degrees in arts, and this was her dream, and she thought she could have a child and work at the same time. But her husband, in his job, he's out of town Monday through Friday, and it's just her and the kid. So there was nobody she could leave the kid with. She's not close with her family. She's not close with his family. She couldn't leave the kid with a sitter because it just cried constantly. So she had to bring the kid with her everywhere. And you can't really bring a baby to a gallery opening, is what she says. So she ended up just kind of quitting. There's lots of other reasons mixed in, but like the main ones was it was just too difficult for her, essentially on her own, to manage trying to work and raise a small child. So she decides to take off work, but the isolation of that is starting to get to her. And the anger and the frustration at essentially doing it all on her own is starting to get to her. And she starts to have all these thoughts of how society pressures women to do this and tricks women into thinking that, oh, we're such a modern society now, you can do both. You don't have to be a stay-at-home mom. You can be a working mom. And she's like, but there's no support for working moms. So how am I supposed to be a working mom? And now I'm expected to be a working mom. And being at home sucks because there's nobody else here for me. And I'm just kind of on my own. And there's no support for me there either. So there's all this kind of frustration and rage building up. And it kind of culminates in the like 20 or 30%-ish of the book where she transforms into a dog and decides that for one night she's not going to let her husband have a break when he walks in, because he's like, oh, I just got home, I just had to drive a long day and I need like a 2-hour break to just decompress. And she's like, what about me? What about my break? And this is essentially every like Reddit am I the asshole story at this point, where we're just like, yeah, she's working too, dude, like actually 24/7, because, well, yeah, because he's like, oh, I'm too tired when he gets home. For the whole weekend, he hardly does anything to help with the kid because the kid's not used to him. The kid doesn't understand how the kid works. How is he supposed to take care of him? So she gets this like moment where she's turned into a dog at this point, and she just says, fuck it. She knows that he's like there. As soon as he walks into the house, she runs out the back door as a dog. And there is like one quote that I like, because it's like she's like running away and her husband's like out in the backyard looking for her and calling for her, and it's like she heard him and she decided not to acknowledge him and to keep going, and says she was night bitch, she was fucking amazing. And she just like takes off, and she goes and just kind of gives into her like primal instincts, her baser instincts, and is a dog for an evening. And then she transforms at the end of the evening, comes into the house when everyone's still asleep, washes everything off and crawls back in bed, and she's like the happiest she's been in a while because she got to do something for herself instead of for somebody else who needs her. And it was kind of the where the switch was there, where she was like, I need to do things for myself, not just what I think I'm supposed to do or what other people need me to do. I need to do things for myself still, but how am I going to manage that when I am basically on my own? And so she ends up finally going and joining the book mommies at the library, where there's like a library session where the librarian reads to the toddlers and the mommies sit with their kids and play games and sing songs and all that stuff. And she was like, I never want to be that kind of mom. I don't want mom friends. So she gives in, partially because before she does her full dog transformation, there's these 3 random dogs show up in her yard, and her son spend the day playing with them, and she's convinced that these 3 dogs are 3 of the book mommies. And so she's like, decides to get closer to them to try to figure out if she's right, because she doesn't want to tell them. She doesn't want them to know her secret, but she wants to find out if they're like her at the same time. And it was about a little bit before this that she had picked up this book in the library called I can't remember what it's called. It's like the encyclopedia or like a magical guide to magical women or something like that. And the synopsis makes a big deal about this book, but it's not really that big of a deal, except for that she's like reading it throughout and finding some sort of kinship with the book and almost use it as a source of divination. And she starts writing letters to the author of the book. She finds her email and starts writing her letters. That's the more important part of the book, is that she starts writing her letters, and in those letters she starts analyzing her own emotions, and it kind of becomes like a journal for her where she starts having thoughts about these different aspects and these different things and about what transformation means. And so she ends up making friends with these mommies, and they immediately try to bring her into their MLM to sell herbs. And so she's like, oh great. And yeah, so that's like mentioned in the synopsis as well. But I think the synopsis makes it bigger than it is, because I really wanted more from that aspect, because there's so much ways that these MLMs prey on women, and in this specific situation. And the author mentions it in the book, but she really gives it like 2 sentences, and that's kind of it. And I was just like, okay, I guess. Like, if you're gonna bring it in, I feel like you should do a little bit more with it at least. But yeah. So, anyway, so eventually she does give in, and she decides to go to one of these meetings, and she joins because she just feels pressured. She makes a comment about how there's so much drinking and kinship and companionship, and people are finally happy. She's like happy because she's actually around other adults and has a moment to be an adult. So she just joins. And I'm like, well, that's kind of valid from the stories you see on anti-MLM, from people who've left MLMs and stuff on any of the anti-MLM videos. And so it's pretty accurate to real life from my understanding. And so she joins, and part of when she joins is she tells them about how they ask her what her why is. And she's like, oh, well, I accidentally killed the family cat, so I need something else to do, clearly. And when she says accident, it was indeed an accident. And this gets a little graphic in the book. She was so consumed by her rage after tripping over the cat that she actually killed it. She went into this like dog mode thing and did kill the cat. So there is animal death in this book, as well as violent death of a pet. So, because she's also killing other small animals in her dog form. It kind of goes along with the rage aspect of it, and that's where I said it has some horror elements, because the scene with the cat and other scenes leading up to it are fairly gory. There's a lot of descriptions in this book that are pretty gore heavy, and that's why I kind of put it on like a literary horror type element. So go know that going into it. So she joins because of this, and then all the other mothers are like, oh, well, I accidentally killed the goldfish, I accidentally killed the gerbil, like that type of thing. Like, basically it's all these overworked women who are trying to present themselves as like perfect to the world. And this is where I think we start to talk about the like images that you have to present to society, or feel you have to present, is kind of runs through the book, where the mother is constantly worried that people are going to perceive her actions as something different than they are, or she wants them to perceive it as something different than they are. She doesn't want people to realize that she's the night bitch, this human dog person, but she wants to be able to act those out and give into those urges at the same time. So there's this kind of talk about making a spectacle of yourself, and not doing that, and how there's a lot of pressure on women to not make a spectacle of yourself. So we get a lot of those discussions in there, and which makes the ending actually kind of fascinating, because the ending is that she's trying to go back to her artistry. She wants to make art, and she's contemplating performance art pieces, and she talks about how she's contemplated them before in the different ones she's talked about, and she thinks she's finally found some things. So she brings in one of the other mothers who she originally thought was a dog, and gets her, she's like, I got a way to get you out of this MLM debt. I need you to be my PR person. And so she puts together this stage performance where she like crawls through the audience on all fours, she howls, she like does this weird display of like bone animals, and she, in the first initial one, eats like an entire steak on stage, just like raw piece by piece steak. And it's like this whole performance that she does, where she is now embracing herself as night bitch and making a spectacle of herself. She continues to advance this show, and it's the kind of this thing, it kind of rushes the end where it's like, oh, she's doing more shows, and she's talked about in the papers and stuff as this weird performance art piece, and it becomes this thing where she has purposefully instead taken that and made a spectacle of herself. So it's like, is she being herself now? Is she still doing what she thinks she should do, or is she still performing for society? Because she's like doing this big display and doing things that people are finding disturbing on stage, because it comes to her like killing rabbits on stage, or a rabbit at every show, and then bringing her young son out to see it and to like stroke its fur at the end of the show. What is she doing? Why is she doing it? Like, is her actually doing what she wants to do, or is this her being extremely counter to the expectations of society? Or is this something that she wanted to do? So it's that question at the end that I think was kind of one of the things where I was like, I don't know how I feel about this ending, because throughout the whole book we're talking about her husband and him not participating in the domestic duties of the household. She makes a point where she's like, oh, he won't clean the bathroom if I don't clean it. Like, what if I just left it? And she's like, no, he would also just leave it. I know he would leave it. I have tried. And same girl. So I get it. Like, it's just that whole thing where it's like, oh, their standard of cleanliness is different. So if you want it clean, you gotta either ask or do it yourself. And there's this whole thing in the end where she, at one point, she decides near the end that she's not going to do bedtimes when her husband is home. He is going to do them, and he's going to take over. And he's like, yeah, sure, okay, cool, babe. And she's like, are you fucking kidding me? All I had to do was ask. Why should I have to ask? Why do I have to ask? Why can't you just do this? You are also an adult in this marriage. You are a parent to this child. Why do I have to ask? And again, this is just every am I the asshole? And so there was like a lot of me being like, I have read this before. Like, but at the same time, it's that frustration. And there was this low level of frustration. So I don't have kids, but I have had men that I've lived with. And so this aspect of it was something that I could feel the low level of rage throughout the book, where she's just like, why do I have to do all this on my own? Why do I have to do this? Why can't you just do it? Why do I need to tell you to do it? You are an adult. You live in this house. Why do I have to tell you? And that kind of frustration and rage. And we get these tense scenes where she's starting to turn more violent as Night Bitch, and you kind of expect and kind of hope that she kills her husband. And it's weird because he's not a bad guy. But then it's that thing where it's like, well, he's not a bad guy, but he's also not helping. But that doesn't mean he deserves to die. He's just, is he a bad guy though? Like, is he actually bad? Is letting your partner, the mother of your child, take care of everything so that you can relax, is that actually a sweet and caring husband? I don't necessarily think it is. And so there's this kind of low rage throughout it where you're expecting something worse to happen. You're expecting. And the worst thing that does happen is the cat. And that was honestly, I was like, oh my God. And she does feel a lot of like remorse and instant guilt and what the fuck did I just do when that happens? But it still happens. And it's the commentary on rage throughout it is something that I was able to identify with, and like a lot of just like this like building kind of frustration that you have. And that's where I get to the one quote that I do want to share with you, because I just really, really like it. And I think it kind of defines what I think about when I say that I like to read books with angry women in them, and angry women getting their justice. And it's part of why I was so mad at Slewfoot. So let me read you this quote. It's a little long, so I'm gonna try to put it up on screen, because I think it's really good, and I think it's really interesting, and I think it makes some good points about why we like to read books with angry women who get to have their revenge. So it says, that single white-hot light at the center of darkness of herself, that was the point of origin from which she birthed something new, from which all women do. You light a fire in your girlhood, you stoke it, and you tend it. You protect it at all costs. You don't let it rage into a mountain of light, because that's not becoming of a girl. You keep it secret. You let it burn. You look into the eyes of other girls and see their fires flickering there. Offer conspiratorial nods. Never speak aloud of a near unbearable heat, a growing conflagration. You tend the flame, because if you don't, you're stuck in the cold, on your own, doomed to seasonal layers, doomed to practicality, doomed to this is just the way things are, doomed to settling and understanding and reasoning and agreeing and seeing it another way and seeing it his way and seeing it from all the other ways but your own. And that last bit, that last little bit, is all one sentence, and it's written in such a way that it makes you feel breathless reading it out loud, but even reading it in your head, you start to feel the crushingness of the settling and understanding and reasoning and agreeing and seeing it another way and seeing it his way and seeing it from all the other ways but your own. And I still feel so much reading that, and I think that quote is just, that was in the first 3% of the book, and that was when I was like, I love this book. It's not, like I said, it's not a 5, it's not amazing, it's not life-changing, but it has that spark of something, and I just needed to share that with you. honestly I just needed to share that with you, because this book reads more like, it's described as a fairy tale in the publisher's ad, and I think it reads more like a cautionary tale. It's more of like, here's what could happen if you give in to your baser desires, but is that a bad thing? It's really just about the woman is doing this. It's very lyrical and poetic in a way, because when you read, especially that sentence that I just read, it's written in a way that makes you express an emotion as you're reading it because of the way the dialogue is done, or because of the way the sentences are structured. And I liked that aspect of it. So I kind of want to try this one on audiobook, because I feel like there might be, it depends on how it's done. It could be done in a really good way. But yeah, that phrase is just honestly what makes me want to read books like this. Books where I understand the rage that this woman is feeling about very small things that shouldn't be making you feel this way, but those small things just start to build up bit by fucking bit until you do want to just turn into a dog and run away. And honestly, I never thought that turning into dogs to fight the patriarchy would be a thing, but here we are this year with organ meats and Night Bitch, and Grey Dog had a bit of an element of that too. So turn into a dog, fight the patriarchy, and to quote the book, demand more and do less. Tell, don't ask. Howl, howl, howl at the moon. I'll see you next time.